Welcome back to another Sales Hacker Live event. We have got an incredible group here to talk about closing the gap between open opportunity and closed won. They're going to share some very interesting, actionable insights into what to do in each sales stage, how to meet new buying expectations, and more. So I'm really excited. But before I turn it over, we want to give people just 1 or 2 minutes to roll in. So while we wait, go ahead, open up your chat and make sure it's set to everyone. Tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from. Drop your LinkedIn link if you want. We want to get to know you. So yeah, we want to keep this super interactive. So definitely take advantage and chat with the other attendees in the chat. Drop any questions that you have along the way in our Q&A, just that way it doesn't get lost in the chat. And then also get ready to interact with some polls. I'm actually going to launch one now just to make sure everything is, everyone has access and everything is working. So go ahead and let us know if the sound is working okay for you. All right, so you did not come to hear from me. We're just going to dive right in. So I'm going to turn it over to the one and only Carl Carell to introduce himself and take it away. He's going to be facilitating this exciting conversation today. So Carl, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Excited to be here and nice to see everyone and where everybody's tuning in from. I know this is an international event. As you guys may hear, I have an accent. I am Swedish, but hopefully I can make do quite well in English. But as Sam mentioned, we will talk about the open opportunity to closed won today. And I wanted to quickly just start what today's discussion is going to be about and what you can expect to get out from it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different stages from opportunity to close, what you should and shouldn't do in each step. And we're also going to talk a little bit on how you can actually make your tech stack and sales tech stack work for you and your team, as well as actually help your buyer to get to that step where you choose to work with each other or not. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what's happened. There's been obviously some very drastic changes into the world over the past 2 years, but what has been the evolution of buying and what are the new expectations and how can we meet them as sales leaders and sales representatives. And we're going to end with a big cliffhanger. What is going to be our prediction? What will be the biggest sales trend of 2022. And today will actually be a panel discussion, so not a lot of boring slides. I think everybody has been in enough webinars over the past 18 to 24 months, so we want this to be an interactive session, as Sam mentioned. But with too much further ado, I want to introduce our 2 other panelists, 2 very talented sales individuals who will be representing both the sales rep as well as the sales leaders. So with that said, Madison, would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
Of course. Thanks, Carl. My name's Madison Simon, and I'm a solutions engineer at GetAccept. I'm solutions engineer / AE. I will be representing the account executive perspective. I've done full cycle sales, and also I've worked with SDRs and gone through the SDR AE handoff process as well. And just a fun fact about me, I enjoy everything water related. So diving, sailing, rowing, swimming, all the water sports. I would probably be a mermaid if I could. Colleen, off to you.
Thanks, Madison. Yes, and thanks for having me. Carl, I'm so excited to be here today. And I am currently the director of sales at a company called Modus, I'm based out of Boston. I've been in sales for about 15 years now, so hoping to, add obviously the perspective from a sales leader, but also have kind of grown up in sales myself. I also have a side business where I do consulting for sales reps, sales managers, and some small startup companies. And fun fact, people usually find it interesting. I worked at McDonald's for about 10 years before getting into sales. I actually ran one of their franchises. And yes, I do still enjoy their food.
That's a fantastic experience, and that's a very global, well-known thing. That working there is a great start to your career and learning essential business skills. And Colleen, one question. We're two representatives from GetAccept here, but do you want to mention quickly what Motus do? I think that can be relevant for the discussion from where you're taking your objectives from.
Yeah, sure. I see a lot of people actually chiming in that they also either work or have worked at McDonald's. So shout out. But essentially, Modus works with companies that are looking to transition their fleet vehicles over to more of a reimbursement style. So we're really taking, a new stance in the work from anywhere and, whole work remote environment that we're moving into now, and really just looking to reimburse employees for their own personal vehicles as opposed to having them driving company cars.
Very interesting. And I think, as you mentioned, Colleen, everyone here very active on social media, and particularly LinkedIn. So I would recommend anyone who find anything interesting today to connect either with Madison, Colleen, or myself, and find out more what we do. Quick introduction to myself. As you guys know, I'm Carl Corell. I am one of 4 co-founders of GetAccept. I have exactly been in B2B sales for 15 years as Colleen, so we share something there. GetAccept, quickly what we do, we actually handle this process opportunity to close, and that's why it's so dear to our hearts. We provide a digital sales room to ensure that account executives can provide the best buying experience and communicate effectively with all types of content, videos, recordings, proposals, e-signatures in one digital sales room to ensure that you have a great buying experience online. And personal about me, I do a lot of road cycling and usually do that so I can cook some more and eat more. So I cycle to eat is usually what I say. But I also wanted to quickly go through, before we get started, which parts of the processes that we are going to cover today. And it's going to be a discussion format, as mentioned before, and we have grossly simplified the sales process. I know there's a lot of different people joining who probably sell different solutions, software, different types of products. So we have simplified it to talk about prep and handover. So our starting point today will be when a SDR, a sales rep or account executive actually booked that first qualified meeting with a potential client. We will then cover around pitch and solution. So essentially, how do you pitch and present your solution in a tailored way to ensure that you can get them to the next step, which is quite naturally propose and close, which I know, again, is very different. Some people talk about quotes and contracts. You don't talk about proposals. But that is the part that we're going to cover today. But with all that said, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so you can drop another slide deck for this time around, and we'll start to kick it off with the first question about prep and handover. So my first question goes to you, Colleen, here is what are buyers' expectations today going into a first meeting? And over these past couple of years, and particularly the past 2 years, has that changed in your opinion?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's kind of been a slow change. I don't think it's something that's happened overnight, but I think they're really expecting more of that consultative approach where we're not coming in telling them, exactly what they need to do and how to fit into our process, but we're really coming in understanding maybe like where they're currently at in their own process and their own buying journey so that we can help them figure out, how we might help them fit into that or what they need to do from there. At least some of the considerations that they should have going through their process, right? So I think a lot more buyers are doing more research, and whereas they used to start off in the process here, they're now getting to us more in the middle of their journey. So I think we just need to consider that they've already done some research and have some information, and it's more about what do they know so far, what questions do they still have, and then how can we help them kind of move forward through that process.
Mm. And I think you're hitting a very important point there, that people are in different parts of their buying journeys today. If we track back to when we started 50 years ago, it was the same starting point. They basically knew nothing apart from a pitch over the phone,
Yeah.
which now changed to G2 crowd reviews or online reviews and different expectations that comes from the content that you put out there as a company. And if we look into Madison from your perspective as a account executive and a solutions engineer, how do you feel about the expectations and going into the first meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with Colleen. I think that the expectations haven't changed that much, but more so like how the process is has changed. So it's still I still feel expected to be a pleasant person to work with and expected to be helpful in providing value. But I see a lot that buyers have this prove it to me mentality, and they want me to get to the point. So they're looking for factual and statistical information. They want to know about ROI and impact and the truth of the functionalities. So the whole, verbal persuasive selling tactics aren't as important. It's really about me proving to them that we have a solid offering and doing it in a timely manner. So it's challenging at times to be human and personal, but also get to the point. And so I think that having that balance and adding real value is one of the biggest changes I've seen in their expectations.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point too. And something just to point out even further there is that it's kind of like turned into this combination of discovery / like consultative call. Whereas in the past, I think it was all, questions from our end to get to that next step. But it's almost this like combination or hybrid conversation now where they need to know enough about how we can help solve their problems in order to get to that next step. So that's often where I see, a lot of missteps in that first conversation where it's just like drilling, and they get to the end to book a meeting and it's like, well, hold on a second. Like, I'm not sure exactly how you could help me. All you know is what you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to not making it feel like an interrogation, more something where you have to provide contextual value to the questions you're asking and why you're asking them, and that you kind of segued perfectly into my second question I wanted to ask you. Like, how you as a sales leader probably seen a lot of different handovers and techniques and processes. How would you categorize a mediocre handover? Because we talked about the things you shouldn't do, right? So could you describe a little bit on how you train your reps to not do?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, like nobody wants to have the same conversation twice. So I think the work that happens in that handoff process and the communication between whatever it is, an SDR and AE, is so important because, going into that next call, the prospect, the buyer, they don't want to be having the same conversation, answering the same questions and kind of going through what they already went through in the first part. So for me, I think, that's the number one thing that needs to happen correctly in that handoff is what do we already know? What do we need to find out? And how can we kind of pick it up from where we left off instead of starting over? I think one way that reps can also, avoid saying the same things over, but make sure that they have their information correct is by honestly just starting the conversation with, here's what I know, here's what we found out on the last call. Has anything changed? Does this sound accurate? So it tells the buyer that we've done our work, we know what we're talking about, we've already connected with the BDR, and it helps just reiterate kind of our starting point instead of starting from scratch.
No, I think that's a question that actually came up from the audience here, from Michael McGowan. Is sales now the wrong name for salespeople? How do you view that, Colleen?
Yeah, it's funny. In one of my past companies, we actually changed the salespeople's name on their email signature for that exact reason. I mean, it's a different role now. I think, will we ever get away from the sales title? I don't know. I mean, it is what we do, right? So I think it's our job and that is what we're responsible for. But it's an interesting point.
No, I think we've experimented with different titles in GetAccept as well. We want to portray what we're actually trying to do. But I think one thing that has changed, instead of selling things today, now it's about figuring out who is actually a good customer, because retention is significantly more important today. So thus, Madison presenting herself as a solutions engineer, I think is a little bit representative of that trend. Like, we're trying to help you find a solution, and should we work together? The other question that I wanted to ask you, Madison, how would you see as a rep, what characterizes a great handover for you, or how do you do it?
Yeah, I think a great handover is all about starting that first meeting, that first sales meeting, let's call it, before you even meet live with the client or the prospective client. So if you can send an agenda or an introduction video beforehand, which does have, Colleen, as you mentioned, the information I already know, as saved from the SDR in that qualification call, or from my own personal research. If that can be started before the first meeting, I think that's a great way to initiate the conversation, because it shows that I'm doing my work and I'm prepared, and then it also gets some excitement going for the client, and the anticipation before they actually meet in person live. So yeah, that would be my biggest thing in going above and beyond.
Yeah, and I think you're touching upon something that's very important, is like clear expectations. What can people actually expect from this meeting? I feel a lot of times when I'm in a buying process, there's some type of meeting set, but I actually don't know what's going to be covered. Will there be a demo? Will there be a presentation? Are we going to talk about what I need? So I think a clear agenda and adding some personality to this part is a great way. And I think like video is obviously a great way of doing that as well. I wanted to end this part talking about prep and handover with a question to you, Colleen, and what would you have as the number one recommendation that you often see is missed by sales reps out there?
Honestly, I think kind of to your point, letting the buyer know exactly what to expect in that call, and coming in just super prepared. I think that's a very common theme for me, is doing as much upfront work to understand the company, the industry, maybe some competitors, that are current clients of yours, knowing who it is that's going to be on the other end of the phone or the video, so that you could start building rapport with them. And then one simple thing that I've seen just be super successful, not only in making sure that the person attends the meeting, but they get more excited about it. We do like Sendoso gifts, or any kind of gift card through email. Send a virtual coffee. Just excited to see you, meet you. It gets them excited for the meeting. It makes them feel like they're meeting a real person, and they're not just connected to somebody through a meeting invite. So I think it's a great way to start building that rapport before you even kind of get live with them.
Yeah.
No, I love that idea. Madison, go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially since nowadays everyone's in a rush. It's funny, like we are supposed to be having more time since we're not commuting to the office and all of that. But I think people are actually busier than before. And so building rapport is more challenging because we just don't have as much time in this meeting hours. So, yep, I would agree.
Definitely a little bit of extra. I would love a coffee next time I take a meeting with you, Colleen, so feel free to try it on me. Great. So with that said, actually we polled a bit on if people actually do send agendas here just now, and it's very much a 50-50 split. 42% says yes, and then it's sometimes and no. So obviously that's a easy way of doing it, and I think personally how we talk about it in the sales teams at GetAccept is, can the agenda provide some type of personalization as well to ensure that it seems like we're trying to prepare for you. So we set the stage that this is going to be about you and how we can help you. So any small finding, even if it's a demo request or a meeting booked directly on the website, do some finding that you find out about them. But going from that, we want to talk a bit now more about the solution side and the pitch of your actually. So what happens in the first and second and third meeting and so forth. And I'll start asking this question to you, Colleen, again, is what are some of the biggest challenges that you see in presenting and pitching solutions, products, or software? Yeah,
I think for me, one of the biggest things that I see, both in my regular job and in a lot of my consulting is we often do a lot of the talking in these conversations, and reps are always like, I don't know how to get them to answer my questions or engaging, or I feel like I'm just drilling them with stuff. And, we should be having these more engaging conversations where it's a back and forth call, because if you don't, at the end, they end up walking away feeling like they were just drilled with questions. And again, they don't know much about how we're going to be able to help them. So, we go through some easy exercises when I'm working with reps to make sure that at the end of each slide, it's not just the question, does this make sense, right? It's got to be something more open-ended. Like, what's your reaction here? How do you feel about this? Does this seem right, or would you change anything? So I think asking more questions as you're moving through that call or presentation or demo to kind of get them interacting with you is going to be important, rather than just going through your own slide deck and kind of, either going to the next page or asking them if it makes sense, because they're going to say it makes sense just to resist from having to have that conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. And I think you touched upon something. I know you at your organization as well track your meetings, speak times, and notes and so forth. And I think it's quite an eye opener when you actually get statistics on how much percentage a salesperson speaks versus how much the buyer speaks. And that's a little small pro tip: is start, if you can put data on this. I think it's quite an eye opener on how you can change. From your perspective, Madison, what do you see as the biggest challenge for you presenting and pitching software like in GetAccept's case?
Yeah, I would say there are a couple of things that are challenging. The first is when the stakeholders, like all of the stakeholders, aren't present in the meeting, or if they're not present, but also resistant to getting involved. That's definitely a big challenge. And then another challenge is understanding the client's needs. In some cases, they think they know what the need is or what the problem is, but they're not giving the full picture, and maybe what they need or what they think they need is actually not as important as something else. And so getting them to speak more, like Colleen mentioned, asking really good probing questions, that's important to uncover the true need and really kind of break the ice when it comes to the relationship and really getting to the core of the issue.
And you both touched upon one thing here in terms of getting everybody involved. We know for a fact that there's not just one or two people usually involved in the purchase process. There's a lot of stakeholders. I think if you look in B2B, Gartner and Salesforce have data around 6 to 8 stakeholders on an average deal, and obviously more in the bigger contract values and a little bit lower in the smaller ones. But how do you overcome the challenge and getting all the different stakeholders involved, or at least as many of them as possible? Colleen, in this case, from how do you train your reps?
Yeah, so I think oftentimes what happens is reps can even get introduced to the right person, but they get pushed down a level, right? And so the rep ends up interacting with, somebody at a lower level than where they had originally started. And so a simple tip there that I think everybody should put into practice is just keeping that person, the original person who deferred you down, in the loop, right? Even if it's not an interaction where they're responding to you, keep them in the loop on every conversation. So follow up via email, keep them on the email threads, let them know, hey, just wanted to keep you updated on how the conversation went and what's happening next. Connect with them on LinkedIn. If you're already connected with them on LinkedIn, message them maybe periodically through there if they weren't originally on the email thread, but just keeping them engaged and in the process is going to do wonders for you as you get to, the final negotiation or closing step. Because if it's someone that you've lost that contact with and you've kind of maintained that relationship that you got deferred down to, what happens is now you've lost that decision maker. And so you're going through, your new contact for all of the decisions, which is just going back up to that original person. So keep that relationship, again, even if it's not a back and forth thing, keep them on the loop and just keep them engaged somehow throughout the process so that when you do need them, you've at least maintained some sort of communication with them and it's not as awkward to kind of go back to them at that point.
No, I think that's very true. If you have to keep them in the loop. It's very hard to come 3 weeks or 3 months later and trying to re-engage a person who you shared a one phone call or at the best maybe some email conversation. Madison, in your case, how do you do it when it comes to this the same challenge?
Yeah, and I'll address it from, kind of the opposite example. She mentioned if you originally had contact with the decision maker but got dropped down. So I'll discuss, if you've never had contact with the decision maker but you're starting with someone who's a little lower in the buying chain. There are a couple things. The first is look for a reason to bring them into the meeting. So continually ask the person that you're working with questions about the organization or the sales team that you're talking, or whatever the solution is. Ask what that decision maker thinks is important, and really keep them in mind when you're having discussions, even if they aren't in the room, and try and see if you can create a reason to invite them to a meeting. And if they're completely reluctant to attend a meeting, I always create post-meeting notes. And I do send that with a summary of the meeting, the recording. I'll drop it into a digital sales room or whatever you use to share content, and I'll send that. And then typically that will get forwarded on, and then I have them in that room, in that content, and I can start engaging with them, even if I know that they're just viewing things and they're not actually attending the meetings. So that's a good way to keep them in the loop. And then if I ever did need to lean on them for an important question or for that final signature stage, I know that at least they've been caught up through the whole process.
No, great point, Madison. And actually came another question from Michael McGowan again, who is asking, is anyone using buyer sites? And I think that's what you're referring to, right, Madison, when you say digital sales room?
Yes. So I send a lot of content throughout my sales process. It's a way that I nurture the entire team, and also with the tracking, it's a way that I know what they're most interested in. But it's important when you use a lot of content for it to not get lost in email threads. So I do drop it all in one central location in a digital sales room, and then I get tracking to understand who's interested in what, who's engaged, who's not, and then it just makes it really easy to add or subtract relevant content pieces throughout the process.
Thank you, Madison. A great question, Michael, again. On the point here of a lot of people have picked up the tips about the virtual coffee in the comments. I think that was great, Colleen. So I'll rephrase another question. That's like, how can you do something that is better than average? So how can you go from mediocre to great? You don't always have to be do everything in the perfect way, but you just have to be better than your competition. So what are some tips, maybe, Colleen, that you have to be better than the average sales rep that you're meeting in your competition?
Yeah, I think it's important to have an agenda, but it's also important to be able to drop your personal agenda, right? So when you're going into this relationship, you have to care more about their needs than your own, right? So it's, almost the end of the year right now. We've all got quotas and goals to hit. But if that's coming across in your conversation and you start dropping what you should do from the prospect's perspective and start moving to your own personal agenda, that's where I've seen so many things go wrong. So I think first and foremost, you need to make decisions or recommendations that are sometimes not in your best interest, but in the best interest of the clients long term. Because honestly, I've seen so many conversations turn out for the better this way, where they start to build so much trust in you that they will become the best long-term business you've had, and even give, referrals and recommendations to other people they know. So I think, it's just all about really caring about your prospect and their process and where they're at, and helping them as much as possible, because you're not going to get anywhere if you try and just focus on your own personal agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very great point, and in today's world as well, even if you don't get a customer from an opportunity, they may very well become foster a great relationship where they, as you say, can be a great recommendation or ambassador for your products. It's easy to ask them, did you like our product, but you maybe didn't see a fit. You have someone in your network, one person that may benefit from having a conversation with us. That's a question that we train our reps on.
It's a good point too, because let's say timing is the problem, right? Maybe they don't have the budget and they're trying to push until after the holidays. if you push so hard to try and get that deal in before the holidays, you could scare them away forever. Where if you just work with them and realize that, hey, I miss on this opportunity this quarter, guess what? You're starting off January and 2022 strong with another deal in your pipeline. But the worst thing you want to do is risk losing that deal altogether.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point. Madison, same question to you. What is one or two things that you think you can do to be better than the average sales rep here in the pitch and solution phase?
Yeah, I think in the pitch and solution phase, the thing that I always have in mind is the experience that I'm giving for the buyer. Of course, I have a solution in mind or a feature in mind. I'm really excited to show them, but I always have to kind of take myself away from my own agenda and put myself in the buyer's shoes. Like, what will they think is the most coolest thing, or how can I give them that wow factor? So any kind of personalization, customization, put their logo in, brand it for their colors, do some extra research so that they know that I really care about their business and I know about their business, and present to them something that they won't forget. I really always go for that wow factor, since they probably sit in tons of meetings and tons of demos. I don't want it to be boring for them. So that's something that I really think about in that pitch demo phase. And Colleen as well, also the meeting them where they're at, like understanding where they're coming from and not pushing too hard my agenda, and always being just honest and transparent. If we're not a good fit, I'll tell them we're not a good fit. But yeah, being on their side.
Yeah, no, I think being empathetic and true to the purpose of why you're trying to do business together. If it's not a win-win, we should not do it. Great points, Madison. So with that, we wanted to move over to the last third phase, which I'm very excited about, but the propose and close, the fun phase when everything gets very, very exciting. We have a question that I think is a little bit loaded. It's very different in different industries. But Colleen, when should you send or present a quote, proposal, and price? And then the follow-up question there: should you send or present it?
Yeah, it is a loaded question. So I think you never want to send it too early in the process. I did recruiting for a while, and they would never actually send a job offer to somebody until they actually verbally accepted it, right? So I'm not going to waste my time, my paper, whatever, sending this over to you until you're on board. I think it's similar in this situation. You don't want to get anything to them until they're actually committed. You're going to be having conversations through the process on what that final step looks like, and maybe what pricing range looks like. And then as far as sending versus presenting, never, ever, ever send the proposal to them before you've had a conversation with them, right? Because I think it leaves a lot of room for error just where you could be communicating with them on what that proposal might look like. Because, for me, I think there's oftentimes people want to negotiate different pieces of that contract. So it might not be like a sticker shock from the price perspective, but maybe they need different terms, or maybe they need some language removed from the contract. So I think without having that conversation about what's important to them is going to get lost in translation if you just kind of hit send and let them review.
No, I think that's I think it's always best to, if you're able to present. But I know a lot of times maybe that's not on the table, depending a little bit on your relationship with the people you're sending the proposal or sharing the proposal with. Madison, how do you view the same situation in terms of sending and presenting, and what time do you actually present price and the final solution for them?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with Colleen here, in that you don't want to just send price right at the beginning of the conversation if they request it, because the last thing that you want to happen is that you end up in a price war with a bunch of other offerings, and they really don't care about the value of the solution, but they're just looking at lowest price. It's never a good place to end up. So after there have been conversations and they see the value, and maybe they're still unsure, but at least like they want to put you in their final decision group, I think that would be a good time to present price. And I always start with ranges. I don't hold back price. in the beginning. I give them ranges, and then as we start narrowing down on, the number of users or the scope of the project, then I'll start putting the pieces together. And I make this a very consultative process. So we do it together. I'll draft the proposal, we'll come to a meeting, and we'll start plugging in the pieces together. And we'll use an editor and do it all live together. And then when it comes to the signing component, trying to get all stakeholders in that meeting to uncover, pieces where they would like to negotiate. I think it's really important, as Colleen said, to have a live meeting, because sometimes we think it's the price, and it's just that they have a cash flow circumstance and they just need quarterly billing instead. So pretty much in agreement with Colleen there. And yeah, present if possible. If not possible to present, definitely send the proposal in a trackable way, however that is, so you understand where in the proposal they're spending most of their time. That helps you understand what it is they're interested in or where they might want to negotiate.
And one thing that we have seen on this subject, so we handle a lot of signable proposals, and we've seen a lot over the years. And I think a common mistake is you work around the proposal, and it's a lot of legal words and very little value to the client. So when you actually present something, to have a proposal that is selling, because there's other stakeholders involved. The poll came in, so 2 to 4 is the most common in this group, and I think. Again, it's very important to maybe the person you're presenting a proposal or quote to is not the only person going to see it. So have you written it and explain it in a way where it's easy to understand, maybe from a VP of finance or financial buyer. I think is a common mistake that people do. Is this understandable for all the different stakeholders, or is this just tailored to the one person that I'm speaking to? And on the note, you mentioned negotiation, Madison. So Colleen, how do you train your reps to negotiate?
So for me, I think it kind of comes back to understanding what their business goals are, right? So I think, I even recently had a rep who said, should I just send over the best price so that we don't have to go back and forth? And I asked him, do you know if price is what they're going to care most about? And he's like, well, no, not yet. I said, then why would you discount the price before we even know if that's going to be of value to them? So I think having the conversation around what is going to be most important to get the job done is the biggest thing that I try and focus on. The other thing I think a lot of reps often miss out in their process is understanding. So they do a great job with discovery and moving through presenting and kind of getting to those final stages. And then the prospect will, agree and want to move forward. And then we just send over a contract and hope that they sign it. So I think the thing that reps could do a better job of in that part of the process is really understanding, okay, once we get to an agreement, what happens next? Does it need to go through legal? Has finance signed off on this, right? So I think, reps could do a stronger job at just trying to figure out the ending part of their process so that they don't get stuck wondering, when the deal is going to get signed or how long it's going to take for that final stamp of approval.
Yeah.
No, I think it's one key takeaway that we have seen as well, and I've seen over the years, is people don't ask what happens next. So if we get a discount, or if we solve this problem, what happens next? Do we engage someone else? Are you ready to sign, or do we move on? We call that the exhaustive question at GetAccept. So answer till you have a final answer. So a virtual close or exhaustive question is how we talk around it, because just by asking one question, you maybe don't get the full answer. And I think asking great questions is a very representative trait of the best salespeople in 2021.
Yeah.
Madison, how do you handle when a customer goes silent as part maybe of a negotiation or sharing a proposal or a quote?
Yeah, before we move on, did you have a note that you wanted to add, Colleen, on the?
I did, thank you, because I think this is so important. But when you're negotiating too, I think one of the things that reps can do better when they're negotiating is maybe something on the contract piece is important to the client or prospect. we need to get something back if we're going to give into that term, right? So if they say, to your point, Madison, I need extended terms or whatever it might be, great. If I can get you that, are you going to be able to sign by the end of the week or whatever, the give and get is? But that's so important because oftentimes we just want to get the job done that we become yes men, right? And so we say yes to everything that we possibly can, but, get some sort of buy-in or agreement back for every give that you're giving to them. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's kind of similar to why we wait to give the pricing in the first place. It's like, if you give me a little bit of your time so I can explain the value, then I can share the pricing and the back and forth. About the Carl,
the customer going silent after sending or sharing proposal or quotes.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because we always have to wonder, why are they going silent, and it's typically they have a reason that they're not sharing, so it's we're always kind of out of the loop. So I always before getting to the point of it's possible for me to be ghosted, I always try and ask them a lot about their timeline and what's going on in their organization, what's their bandwidth, what are some possible barriers that might prevent this project from moving forward, so that I can be proactive in understanding things that might put the project on hold or prevent the company from having the budget. That used to be a really big issue for me, was timing. The timing would just keep getting delayed because I wasn't proactive enough in understanding that what was going on in their organization. And that's why they went silent, was because they no longer had the bandwidth or the time for the project. But there are tons of reasons that things go silent. And I think for me, I never want to be too pushy, but I always want to keep adding value. So I definitely do a delicate balance between giving them their space to come back, and also letting them know that they're not forgotten and that they're still a priority and they're still important to me, and I'm available if they come back. So, even if it's sharing something on LinkedIn that I know is relevant, updating something, if the product has a new feature update, letting them know that this has occurred, but never being pushy or offended that they're not responding, because until they share with me the reason, someone may have died and I just don't know. Yep.
Nope, definitely. And I think good relationship with people and the ability to be able to ask those questions. It's hard to ask the tough questions if you don't have a great relationship from the get-go. And I think to Colleen's point, asking great questions and understanding what's important to them is very important as this end phase, because then you can refer back to those conversations and what they mentioned. One last question before we move on to the last big question: what is the biggest trend in sales 2022? I wanted to ask you, Colleen, what does your tech sales stack look like? I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing that.
Yeah. We use a lot of tech stack. I think Gong has been probably the best thing, just to go back and listen to calls and kind of evaluate, what we discussed earlier about talking too much versus listening enough. LinkedIn Navigator, I think, is huge. It's, continued to kind of evolve, and we're able to really build a lot of those virtual online relationships stronger by using LinkedIn. Obviously CRMs, calling systems. I think one of the great pieces of technology that, if you're not using, is something to kind of latch onto, is just being able to dial someone in their own local area code. I know for me personally, if I don't know the phone number, I'm not going to answer, but if I think it might be my daughter's school or doctor, I'm probably going to pick up. So I think latching on to things that we have like that at our disposal is going to be super important.
No, I think that's very true when it comes to numbers. I don't answer any numbers if they're not local numbers or someone who I have in my contacts. And same question to you, Madison. What do you use in your tech stack for sales?
Yeah, definitely LinkedIn for lots of research, and video tools. I have a lot of video tools. So we use Chorus, which is very similar to Gong. Also Zoom to have video meetings, and then some kind of screen recorder. We have, I've used Cloud App in the past, or Loom, but also we have one within our platform. And since I mentioned I create a lot of content and send a lot of content, I basically live in that digital sales room, and hop there and into my email to respond. But I'm very content focused, just so I can create a nice visual experience. And then we have our CRM HubSpot. So pretty simple for me.
Thank you, Madison. I think that's an important. I'll mention a couple of takeaways to just summarize what's been said today. I think Madison and Colleen have had some great takeaways, and hopefully everyone's found one or two things that they can bring back to their own process or their own teams. I think one overarching trend is how can you design a great sales process that supports a buyer-focused process with great questions that provides value along the entire way. I think Colleen said it very well there, that it's important to not interrogate in certain parts. Like, you always have to keep them interested and have a little bit of that it factor, even if it's a discovery call. I think another part, like in a digital world, building trust and being personable, a lot of what you talk about, Madison, was how you use video to ensure that you're personable and showing your face and showcasing that Madison is behind this. Is not just the company that I'm representing, and I'm staking my reputation on this. And I think also another trend, we talked about communication and being effective. You mentioned Sendoso, you mentioned small messages on LinkedIn. Being effective and accessible to your customers is really important. And I think, Madison, you mentioned the digital sales room as a great way to doing that in the opportunity process, where you can have a conversation around the content that you share. And I think another thing that was mentioned is knowing your competitors was part of it as well. It's something that I'm very passionate about. We have to be better than our competition. We have to know our top 3 competitors very well and ensure that me as a sales rep or my team have the tools and process to do one better than them. Always deliver 105% of what they're delivering, because in that way we give the buyer the better process and ensure that they trust us. I know we're pretty much on time, so I'll go quickly to the last question. Colleen, what do you think is the biggest trend in sales for 2022?
Yeah, I think to some of the same points, just tying it all together is really that we're moving into this virtual world now, where we might not be getting on the road and being face to face with people as much as we used to be. And so I think right now the people who are being super successful are figuring out a way to standardize their own personal process to get in front of people virtually and make technology and social media a part of their process. So I think for us as sales leaders, formalizing that process in 2022 and making it a more well-known foundation to the training that we're providing to new sales reps is going to be super important.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And same question to you, Madison.
Yeah, I think we've already covered it, but just to reiterate, creating a buyer-centric process in this digital world and making the buyer feel like they're buying, not being sold to. So, this is really challenging when we're digital, because we still want to be personal and human, but we also need to, add value and not just try and sell anything to anyone. So, that buyer-centric digital process is, I think, that the biggest trend for this next year.
Thank you, Madison. And I'll share my thought on the biggest trend. It's very much to I think Madison and Colleen had excellent answers to, so I agree wholeheartedly with those 2 observations. From my perspective, representing GetAccept, we have created a new software category with G2 Crowd that's called the Digital Sales Room. So to what Michael McGowan asked before, buyer site or microsites for your clients, that is what I believe is going to be the biggest trend for 2022. And tying that back to a recent research for CSOs from Gartner, who predicted by 2025, 80% of all B2B selling will be done in a virtual room or a virtual setting. And I think designing a process for reps to be successful in that environment is going to be the most important question for sales leaders, to ensure that they deliver a great process from opportunity to close for those reps, so they can actually build upon those relationships. Great. We are on time, right, Sam?
Yes, amazing. This has been really great. I loved the key takeaways, and a couple people have asked, but we will be sending out this recording so that you can listen back and sharing some of our favorite pieces. So thank you all thank you to everyone who's joined, and also thank you, Madison, Colleen, and Carl, for doing this.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting, Sam. And I just wanted to mention one last thing. Keep the conversation growing. I know Colleen and Madison are always open to conversations, to connect with everybody again on LinkedIn, and follow Colleen. She produces some great content on LinkedIn. So keep the conversation going, and thank you everybody for listening to us for a full 49 minutes. So thank you.